15th of November 2023, and this is the first part of the unveiling of Camp Coot-tha Place. A beautiful spot, and the naming will give a very suitable historical marker to the start of the Discovery Trail, which you can see go off into the distance.
Okay, everyone, quiet on the set. We're shooting.
Proceedings now, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this event here at Mount Coot-tha. My name's George Hulse. I'm a member of the Toowong RSL sub-branch. I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations people who have been the custodians of this land in the past and the present and going forward into the future. And the purpose of this service is to acknowledge this site as a significant piece of military history in Brisbane during World War II. We also need to remind ourselves of the ongoing link Australia has with the United States of America, particularly in regard to defence matters. I'll ask Mr. Peter Gow, the President of the Toowong sub-branch of the Return and Services League, to address us on the significance of this site, together with Councillor Greg Butterman of Pullman Vale Ward. So I'd like to acknowledge some dignitaries. My boss, Mr. Peter Gow, of course, you're acknowledged, so remember that next time you write a report on me.
Okay, L&D report.
Yeah, okay.
Do that.
Mr. Greg Butterman of the Brisbane City Council Pullman Vale Ward. Mr. Mike Harris from the Australian American Association, who will be invited to respond to Mr. Peter Gow. I'd like also to acknowledge Mr. Peter Collins, wherever you are, Peter. Yep, there you go. And also Mr. Peter Racey, who has been on the phone to me about 1,060,000 times about military significant things.
He's on the phone to you, he's not on the phone to me, George.
Mr. Mike Harris from the Australian American Association will be invited to respond to Mr. Peter Gow as we go down through this running list. We'd also like to acknowledge the Brisbane City Council for taking the time, effort and expense to provide a sign that informs visitors of the background of this place. You can't see that sign right now, but in a little while it'll be unveiled and you'll be able to read what that sign says. I'd like now to ask Mr. Peter Gow to address the gathering. Our President, Mr. Peter Gow.
Yeah. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As George said, I'm the President of Toowong RSL. Well, as a young lad, I used to come out here with my mother and father to JC Slough Floors, and I saw this concrete. I wonder what it is. And when George spoke to me, I actually found out what it was and the significance of what it is. Because Mount Coot-tha was declared a public reserve in 1880. By 1930 it was a popular area, crisscrossed with walking tracks. But on the 1st of August 1942, the Brisbane City Council lent the park to the US Navy for use as an ordnance depot. And the 55th Naval Construction Battalion built the depot. The 55th Naval Construction Battalion arrived in Brisbane on 24th of March, can't read my own writing, in 1943. Such battalions were known. Does anyone know what they were called? No, then you can't answer. CBs. A very famous name throughout the world. After their unit emblem. The battalion was based at Camp CB off Laverack Avenue at Eagle Farm, which the unit constructed prior to coming up to do the mine depot. The CBs were trucked up here to Mount Coot-tha every day and to build the above ground magazines were covered in dirt and clear the bushland with bulldozers and tip trucks for roads and buildings. They used explosives to blast roads along the mountainside. The Allied Work Council provided Australian labour to assist the CBs. They initially built 13 magazines which were timber framed and covered with fibrelite. Later, 38 fabricated steel Amco magazines were shipped to Brisbane from the US and based in the depot. All magazines were covered with dirt, grass and bush to aid camouflage. A camp for the US personnel was built at the base of the depot near the Hoop Pine picnic area. It comprised of administration buildings, buildings, prefabricated concert huts, and separate ones for officers and enlisted men, as you can imagine. Messes, kitchens, a bakery, food store, quartermaster store, a chief petty officer's office, and a hospital. As a US Naval facility, the terms are different to us. They had officers' messes called the wardroom, the kitchen was called the sick bay, the galley was the bakery, and so they had different names. And the latrine was called the head.
Heads,
Yeah.
absolutely. Heads up.
Yeah. This was a powder surveillance building, a garage and maintenance shed, serviced the depot's vehicles and machinery. And there was also a small pump house. The depot had 2 entry points, both which are manned by sentry boxes and surrounded by barbed wire fences to prevent public access. These are at the Mount Coot-tha Reserve Gate and at the intersection of Simpson Road and Sir Samuel Griffith Drive. The depot was commonly referred as Mount Coot-tha. The magazine held detonators for unfused mines, which are stored in open pits. This is quite significant because Brisbane at that stage was a major submarine base for the US Navy. And they're all down at New Farm. They had their base ships there, and this is where they actually got supplied from this depot.
Also, there's Archerfield was the major aircraft maintenance area.
Both items were put together in the depot's assembly plant building. A few months after the opening, the US Navy requested the site to be formally requisitioned in preparation for expanding the depot and leasing further land. The US Navy commenced paying the council for the lease of the reserve on the 31st of May 1943, and the rent was £1,413.08.
I got a fair good deal.
Yes. Additional sites were leased on the 20th of May and the 15th of June 1943, plus 9th of May 44. By that later date, there were so many personnel at the depot, some enlisted men had to be accommodated in a separate tent area, which is adjacent to the base itself. Torpedo storage and assembly was added to the depot's responsibility. Now, when you can imagine a torpedo had something like 500 kilos of explosive in it. So you can imagine how much explosive was stored in this area.
When in doubt, C4.
Yeah. The Australian Army hired service leasing, hired the US Navy leasing the Benedcit stone factory at Mount Coot-tha for a US Navy torpedo repair shop. So it was expanding. A large extension and new crane rails were added to the factory, while the enlistment man barracks and mess were built nearby. Torpedo and storage and assembly was of major importance. US General Douglas MacArthur was only allocated a small number of warships in the 9th Fleet by the US, but his submarines could carry the fight all the way to the Philippines. Brisbane, as I said, became a major US submarine base on the east coast. The Australian Army occupied the summit, where we've got our lovely restaurant now, and placed anti-aircraft guns up there, while the searchlights were mobile, being mounted on 4-wheel towed trailers. The large Moreton Bay fig tree in Mini Park was heavily lopped to provide a clear cone of fire. These trees never recovered, unfortunately. In 1944, the Australian Army and searchlight batteries were vacated, the summit for rebasing elsewhere, and the US Navy then occupied the gun pits and other facilities. In 1944, the Seabees began to reallocate the US depot to Darwin. The depot was downgraded, so the command fell to a lieutenant. The Royal Australian Air Force then came in and reutilised the facilities at Mount Coot-tha for magnetic and acoustic mine depot. So not very nice little things being stored there. Like Lieutenant W.C.A. Warland commanded the RAAF depot. By the end of September 1945, the US Navy had built 58 Armco steel magazines. So that's a significant amount of explosives stored in this area. 3 small detonator magazines, only about 4 foot by 4 foot by 5 foot, were also added to the depot. They estimate that 120,000 tonnes of explosive were stored at Mount Coot-tha throughout the war.
I'm writing all this down here, Peter.
There was a test.
Did you say pounds or kilos? Pounds.
Tonnes.
Tons?
Tonnes of explosive.
Did you say 12,000 tonnes?
120,000 tonnes.
Where was that held?
Here.
20,000 tonnes of explosives.
The US Navy maintained its control on Mount Coot-tha until the 31st of August 1945. The US Navy ceased paying rent on the 7th of May 1946. The Royal Australian Navy occupied the depot from 1st September 45 to 46, and for the specific purpose of supervising the removal of ammunition from the reserve. By 15 September 1945, a clean-up and disposal party comprised of 8 officers, 179 sailors left the site. On the 24th of August 1948, Council lodged a claim for £1,952 for the Commonwealth for the removal of the concrete floor slabs, plus the general restoration of its use after a US depot. On 10th of November 1948, Council reassessed its compensation claim and it was reduced to £1,748 for 5 shillings. Council decided to retain rather than remove the 800-yard concrete drain built by the US Navy on the depot behind Simpson Road. The US Navy left a road, network of drains, concretes, culverts and footbridges still scattered throughout the Mount Coot-tha Forest Park. In total, the US Navy spent $300,909 on the Mount Coot-tha mine depot, and the Australians providing £35,162 and 60 pence or US in reciprocal land lease aid for the project.
Wow.
So if you come here now, folks, you walk through this, you will still see the remains of this depot here. And this is what I remember as a kid, but then I didn't know about it. But thank you very much. And I hope this is actually giving you some information of what I believe is one of the most important parts in this area. Oops. Yep. I nearly took it.
Right. It'd move this mountain until the go out.
Well done. Thank you. I think Peter deserves that. When I put it on Peter to say something, and I said to him, and make it 7 minutes, I thought I'd get just a couple of sentences about what was here and some concrete, but what we received was first rate, Peter. Congratulations, that's a great presentation, and I didn't time you. But
6 minutes and 52 seconds.
Thank you. There's the time for it. Every word you said was well and well received. Thank you. I now ask Councillor Greg Ardeman to address the gathering. So, Greg, please.
Yeah, no, thank you, George.
Join us.
I wish Peter had only gone for 3 or 4 minutes, because I'm listening to every bit mentioned in there. I'm going, yep, I've got that. I've got that. But the one thing where he was talking about the CVs that he didn't mention, which I will, when I come to that part in the speech, and you'll like it. I thought for sure you were going to say it, but I'm glad you didn't. No, so thank you, George, and thank you, Peter. That was a very comprehensive background, and I guess through my journey on this exercise to lead to where we've got to today, I've become very aware of the background and certainly share your passion and enthusiasm. Also to Mike from the Australian American Association, Peter of course is the head petitioner, Peter Collins, who I've got to know well, Alan, wherever Alan is, yeah, Alan over there. So it's a real pleasure to be here today. It's always great to see something that starts out as a request actually become a reality, and it's appropriate that only after a few days of commemorating Remembrance Day that we've got another opportunity to recognise those who have served in the defence of our country and given us the freedoms that we enjoy as a society today. It is important that we're continually reminded of such heroics, and signs such as the one that we're about to unveil today is a great way to do it. And being in a prominent location in one of our most popular parks, I'm confident that the story of Camp Coot-tha will live on for many years. I want to acknowledge the role that many people, including head petitioner Peter, played in leading up to today's unveiling. He first flagged with me, I'm thinking maybe 18 months ago, it could have been 2 years ago, but certainly it was a while ago, his intention to petition Council to name the picnic area where we stand today at the entrance to JC Slaughter Falls, Camp Coot-tha Place. At the time I wasn't aware of the story behind it, but he knew of my interest in such history, and given that Mount Coot-tha is in the Port Vale ward, so began the journey. But where you talked about council and compensation and the like, Peter, it's sort of a smile, because anyone who's been part of the petition process know that these things don't happen overnight. They need the support, and this one certainly attracted many signatures. And then it has to be presented to council for debate and voting, and then the wording has to be approved, and then a date agreed to for the installation and unveiling. So 2 years on, here we are. It was about 12 months ago, I had a look at the council records the other day, and it was about 12 months to the day that I spoke in the council chamber in support of this petition, and to my delight it received unanimous support from councillors on all sides. And in my speech I talked about how just over 80 years ago the US Navy was planning to formally take control of the Mount Coot-tha Reserve, and this is probably where you'll hear a lot of what Peter had previously said. It was used as an assembly depot for aerial mines which were deployed across the southwest Pacific area during World War II. And as Peter rightly said, by the end of the war, Camp Coot-tha had handled a total of 120,000 tonnes of explosives. Our role in the war came about largely as a result of the Brisbane-born first American ambassador, Richard Casey. His efforts saw the Pensacola convoy berth at Hamilton a mere 15 days after the attack of Pearl Harbor. And in 1943, especially after the sinking of the Centaur of the Sunshine Coast, Camp Coot-tha gave submarines fighting the Imperial Naval Force the strategic weapons they needed to take the battle to the front line. And as part of that effort, as we've heard earlier, the US Naval Construction Battalions, otherwise known as the Seabees, were busy building roads, bridges and other structures, a number of which can still be seen here at the JC Slaughter Falls picnic area. This is the bit you didn't mention. What was their motto? They had a motto. I'll give you a hint. I'll give you a hint. A former Brisbane Lord Mayor and Premier of this state was known as Can Do. That's correct. So the Seabees' motto was Can Do, and they certainly did that and left their mark on Mount Coot-tha. In addition to this sign, Council is proud to also honour our remaining World War II veterans through the revitalised National Australia Remembers Freedom Wall, not far from where we are today. And there's certainly plenty of history here on the mountain. If you know where to look, and I'm sure Alan Tonks, who is here today, would be more than happy to share that with you as part of the tours he conducts on a regular basis, although I'm thinking on a hot day like today we might wait until winter to do that. She's a bit warm. So I look forward to hearing from Mike, and then where we can unveil the Camp Coot-tha Place sign, and you can see then what it will say in perpetuity. So thank you very much. Thanks so much.
They were good words. Thanks very much, Greg. I really appreciate what you just said. And as an ex-soldier, and all of us in the RSL appreciate the interest that guys like yourself have got in military significant sites and military history. Not a lot of people, apart from Anzac Day and Remembrance Day in Australia, seem to have that degree of interest.
They should.
They should. And I really like the terrier-like disposition that Peter Razy has in making sure that these things... Oh, I know. I've had him around my ankle. So now what I'd like to do is ask Mike Harris on behalf of the Australian American Association to respond to the address provided by Peter Gowan, possibly also by our councillor. Mike Harris, please step forward.
Very much. Yes, good morning everybody in this very warm morning in Brisbane, late November. It's indeed an honour and a privilege to thank everyone attending here today, and also to give appreciation to all those who played an important role in the organising and making of this historic event possible, in particular the Toowong RSL's George Hurst and Toowong RSL President and today's event speaker Peter Gow, and of course Councillor Greg Anderman and of the ward of Pullenvale, who worked so hard to get this project through. Congratulations, Councillor. And also our head greyhound over here is always biting at people's heels to get these petitions in. Well done, Peter. Well done indeed. It's also very heartwarming to know that we are all present here supporting and remembering the significant presence of the US Navy here at this site during World War II, and today's naming and recognition by formal signage of the name Camp Coot-tha Place. And I would especially like to thank our event speaker, Peter Gow, for sharing his research and historical information. And it was quite interesting actually to hear him talk about as a young boy coming through here. And who would have known that the Yanks had a base camp up here, or a camp up here, with all those things going on. It's just incredible actually.
It is.
And on the 1st of August 1942, the Brisbane City Council, as we know, lent this bushland area to the United States Navy to use as an ordnance depot, and a determining factor for the choice was that its dense bushland was deemed appropriate for providing suitable camouflage for munition storage. And once the construction had begun, the peaceful bushland area would have become a real hive of activity. I know Peter mentioned about the actual work going on. I can just imagine Seabees clearing the bushland with their bulldozers. The explosive sounds of dynamite. They didn't have plastic in those days, I don't think, but dynamite, did they?
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Sort of forming roads up there on the hillside there. And all the other work that was going on, as Peter said, the constructing of cupboard magazines for ammunition and explosives, the construction of igloo accommodation huts, the hospital, the erection of the security fencing protecting the whole camp. And another thing he mentioned about 120,000 tonnes of explosives. If they had gone off, it would have taken the whole site away, I should imagine. The construction of the torpedo storage and torpedo assembly area is very interesting, because it was of most significant importance, because the US General Douglas MacArthur had only been allocated a small number of warships at his disposal by the US Navy. Nevertheless, his submarine fleet in Brisbane had the utmost capacity to carry the fight to the enemy, as Peter said, all the way to the Philippines. That's a long way from Brisbane, and Brisbane became the major US Navy submarine base along the coast of Australia. Hence the importance of the torpedo storage and assembly area that was located here in fairly close proximity to the US base, submarine base on the Brisbane River. I've made a few notes about Peter's speech. He said there were 13 magazine holders. The camp had a place there for US personnel, no doubt the enlisted men and the officers.
Separately.
Yeah, 500 kilo explosives in the torpedo heads. Oh, unbelievable. Magnetic mines were kept here. Lots of explosives. I can just imagine what it was like, and when I arrived here today, I drove past here about 30 years ago. I live on the south side. And when I got here, I thought, how could a camp be possibly built up in those hills and around here? It must have been quite a big project to do, and the can-do abilities of the Seabees and everybody else who was involved are quite exemplary actually. It's just amazing. I'm just amazed. I'd like to go for a walk up in these hills one day and have a look around for myself.
Take plenty of water.
Take plenty of water.
Believe
Okay.
me.
Just in finishing, ladies and gentlemen, I again like to thank Peter for his inspiring speech, and it is also inspiring to see organisations in Australia supporting the special relationship that exists between Australia and the United States of America. Our coming together today for this event is evidence of the foundation of the close ties that are reflected between our two great countries, and I'm grateful to you, everyone here today, for upholding and supporting the value of this very strong friendship. And finally, my very sincere appreciations to all Australians for the many years of being good friends, supporters, and mutual allies of the Americans, and may that go on.
Absolutely.
Australians and Americans have always been there for one another, and we always will be. Absolutely. I thank you.
Well done, Mike.
Thanks, you.
It's a good presentation.
Well done.
I'm getting teary here talking like that.
Thank you, Mr. Mike Harris. We're quite often reminded about the American-Australian link, and it really doesn't take much imagination to go back to the First World War at one of the most successful battles ever fought during the First World War by Australians was actually fought with Americans on the 4th of July 1918, and it was the Battle of La Hamel. John Monash was the boss of that, and he, as an Australian general, had American soldiers under his command. So our American-Australian link goes right back to the 4th of July 1918. So there you go, Mike, your link goes way back, not just the Second World War, way back. We have fought with Americans on battlefields going right back.
Under the command of Australian officers.
John Monash was the main man. Okay. Now we're here really to see what this sign says. That's why we're here. So we're going to do it, and we're going to ask Greg Ardeman to do the honours along with Peter Gow.
And maybe Mike as well.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
And before we get to that, can I just please interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
There is just one historical little fact that I just need to correct, and it's in relation to the mines that were stored here. And it's a really easy fact to sort of get confused because, and he started out as a global picture about talking about submarines and the US 7th Fleet, and the mines that were here were actually mines for what was called the Black Cats, and they were Catalinas. They were the world's first stealth aircraft. Blacked out, muffled, no lights, amazing craft that from Cairns up to almost Tokyo seeded floating mines, and the mines were assembled here. So Brisbane has these two incredible historical elements to their World War II service. One, as you said, the submarines, and the second one here in relation to these floating mines. An incredible story. And I just couldn't quite let it go through. I just couldn't stop myself from just correcting the record. No one's fault. So, George, my apologies.
No need for apologies, Peter. This is all good information, and it adds to the richness of what we're doing today. So I'll ask my dignitaries, that we've gone from 1 to 3, to step forward, and in a moment, please, Mike.
Sure, mate. Yeah.
You go.
Yeah.
Oh, well done. Well done.
More concluding remarks before I go, and one person who has been mentioned, and I'd like to mention again, is Mr. Alan Tonks, this gentleman here. Now, Alan is a bus driver.